Hey y'all, we starting a wee of a tad bit late, but hey, what else can you say? Salam alaikum, brother Jamil. How are you doing, brother Jamil? I don't know if you recognize me, but I recognize you from the House of Knowledge. I used to work at Pyramid Bookstore. Yes, I did, right there on Georgia Avenue. Salam alaikum to you, brother. Hope everything is going well with you and your family. Greetings, Liu Kang. Not sure who Judges 61 is, but greetings to all of y'all. This is Rootwork here on the Black Power Media platform. Please, if you have not subscribed yet, please subscribe. Please like the video now because you're probably going to forget by the end of the show. But like the video now, subscribe now. Make sure you share this video and all of the other videos. Greetings, M Breeze. So today we want to talk about climate change and black women fighting for the soul of climate change. I need to give my guest, okay, she's coming in now. I see her now. But yeah, real quick. Yes, Brother Jamil, um, Brother Hodari Ali's House of Knowledge, Pyramid Bookstore right there on Georgia Avenue, brings back very, very fond memories of being in Washington, D.C. I think of it often. If I could encapsulate Washington, D.C., and bring it here to Los Angeles, all would be right in my world. Just no snow, and I need some ocean. Other than that, I'm good. Greetings to Eric. Greetings, Sugar Shan. Y'all come on in. Come on in. Come on in. Greetings to those of you I can't see. Appreciate you being here. Again, this is Rootwork on the Black Power Media platform. Please like, please subscribe, please share. We also have a Patreon where you can get programming also. So please continue to support this media institution. I have do a version of Rootwork early mornings for KPFK Radio, which is part of the Pacifica Network. That is an independent media institution also. But Black Power Media, even though it's on YouTube, this is a Black independent media institution. So definitely need your support. Appreciate all that you do for us and want to remind you to continue to do for us. And we will continue to bring you the content and the analyses, the context, the guests that you don't get anyplace else. So, again, I want to talk about Black women fighting for the soul of climate change. When I think of climate change, actually, it used to be called global warming. And I think the conservatives had a hissy fit over that. So somebody, I don't know who made the decision to change the terminology, but now it's climate change. But yes, the planet actually is warming. Yes, this is an environmental concern. We've heard about Greenpeace, Sierra Club for years. Um, I don't know if it was our own interpretation or if the media labeled folks like that as tree huggers, environmentalists. I'm not sure what happened. I just know what's out there in popular media. But because of what is out there in popular media, a lot of times the media, a lot of times journalism, which bills itself as a check on the government power, a fourth estate or fifth estate, sometimes they're just ignorant. They're not necessarily trying to deceive, but they will help amplify misinformation. And sometimes, of course, it's also deliberate. My point being is that we don't always think about Black people when we're talking about environmentalism or the environment, or we don't always think about the ways that, or should I say, in addition to that, the environmental movement does not always address the ways climate change, pollution, etc., environmentalism affects Black people. But fortunately, despite all of that, there have been strides. There's always been work around this issue. It just hasn't always been highlighted. So, again, when you have an independent media institution such as the Black Power Media platform, that gives us an opportunity to shine an even greater light on those types of issues. So I want to bring on my guest now today. This is Dãnia Davy, who currently works with Oxfam. She's a senior policy advisor for the U.S. Southeast region of Oxfam, which is an international humanitarian organization. Dãnia, thank you so much for being on here today. What's up, girl?
Thanks so much for having me. I just flew in from Atlanta to DC, and boy, are my arms tired. I've been running around. First, you had me on the radio this morning. Now you got me on the podcast this evening. But I'm really well. I really appreciated what you said as the intro, in terms of the way that the media has portrayed this issue. And so I'm really excited we can kind of set the record straight on your show today.
Yeah, let's set the record straight. I wanted to also mention real quick, we talk about Black power, we talk about serious issues, but damn it, if we can't have fun, then I don't want to be a part of it.
Absolutely.
I haven't heard that corny joke in so long. I haven't heard that cornball in so long.
Listen, I miss my calling as a comedian. So, every chance I get to slip one in, I'm going to do it.
You just flew in and your arms are tired. You showing your age too. You showing somebody's age.
I feel like I really have to establish my age at the outset, because people want to try and tell me that I'm young, or I look too young to do the work that I do. And so
right.
I definitely intentionally aged myself with that corny joke.
Hey, but we gotta establish our bona fides, as they say. We gotta let folks know we ain't new to this.
True to this.
Okay, we've been here a minute. All right, they need to recognize. But anyway,
that's right.
So, yeah, I did have you on the local show earlier this morning, and we talked in particular about an essay that you penned this week on the blog. Actually, let me see if I can pull it up, because one thing about my show is we gonna have some technical difficulties. Yes, we is. I've just embraced it, and I can't. Okay, oh well, whatever. Anyway, this essay that you wrote, "Nothing New Under the Sun: Southern Black Women and the Fight for the Soul of Climate Change." So now, not only do we usually not hear about Black folks and climate change, I don't think I've ever heard the terminology of fighting for the soul of climate change. Why don't you tell folks what you mean by that?
Well, for me, everything goes back to the land. Our power as a people goes all the way back to our unique gifts and abilities from our ancestors. And that's a big part of the history that Black folks have in this country, is that we had a specialized knowledge and skill set around working the land, around caring for the land, around stewarding the land and growing from the land. And so we were actually imported illegally for the specific purposes of making the most productive use of the land, because the colonists had no skills whatsoever or any ability to grow from the land. And so it was fundamental that they had African peoples to do that work. And then they decided to steal the intellectual property and labor. And so when I talk about the soul in the article, I really want it to be made clear that climate change, the conversation, the terminology has changed, but the reality is that our ancestral heritage is connected to the land and connected to stewarding the land. And the environmental justice movement was really born out of the struggles of Black women. So Black women were calling for their government, their local and federal government, to recognize that the ways in which the built environment, in particular in Warren County, North Carolina, there was a landfill that was going to be placed near a predominantly Black community. And a working Black woman said, no, our communities are overburdened by all of these environmental hazards and harms. And those directly connect to the ways in which we have poor health outcomes. And it just adds insult to the injuries of the ways in which our land was stolen from us. Our heritage was attempted to be stolen from us. And so when we're thinking about the soul of climate change, it's really thinking about the ways in which, yes, fresh air, enslaved agricultural engineers, absolutely. It's thinking about the ways in which the soul of our people really is the legacy from which all of the global wealth that the US has amassed is built upon. And then the flip side of that is the global harms of the environmental pollution that our nation is number one in the world in terms of producing. That is the antithesis of the ways in which our ancestors stewarded and related to land, not as something that you can own and control, but something to be revered and respected.
Hmm. Incinerators, landfills, petrochemical corporations, all of these extractive and or polluting industries being placed on the land in these communities, poisoning the land, poisoning the air, poisoning the people of these communities. We even had a fight out here in Los Angeles several years ago against an incinerator that was planned for South Los Angeles. So the issue is not limited to the South at all. But again, as you said, we have a unique relationship with the southeastern portion of the United States, which also relates to you personally in terms of where our most recent relationship, you and I, in terms of the job that you had before this with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives and the Land Assistance Fund. Can you tell folks about that work briefly?
Absolutely. So the Federation is 56 plus year old, Black owned, cooperatively owned cooperative business development institution that was born out of the civil rights movement and the Black cooperative development movements. And the work that I was doing as the director of land retention and advocacy was specifically related to heirs property. And that was the conversation that we've recently had, and all the ways in which the folks that were a part of the not so great migration and all of the movements away from the Deep South, they did not really have the mechanisms by which they could be legal stewards of the property. And so a lot of times that land that was owned by African Americans, about 19 million acres in 1920, was amassed by African Americans in the South. And so almost all of that, we're at less than 2 million acres now in terms of Black land holdings in the US. And the reality is that the heirs property issue or the fractionated interest issue is what happens when a landowner passes away without a will or an estate plan. And then that the family members, the state's law, the state's intestacy laws determine the fractions of which the family members, the descendants of that person, own the interests. So they own the entire property in fractionated interests. And that plays directly into the environmental justice issue. And actually, some of the work I was doing at the Federation is directly connected because there are these renewable energy products that cannot be produced in Europe because it's illegal, because they know how toxic it is to generate these wood pellets. And so what they do strategically is they identify air property dominant areas in the South because there's less likelihood of the communities being able to legally fight back. And they buy fractionated interests, and then they basically deforest that entire community. And then the wood pellet production causes a whole host of health hazards to the Black community living close by. And so there's really no way to draw a clear line between the work that I was doing with the Federation. I'm still in solidarity with that work, and I still do a lot of heirs property work and trying to connect those of you like you that's a descendant living in California to the reality of why they try to target the folks that don't live on the land and might not be connected to the land. And they might tell the family that it's for renewable energy or sustainability and use all the buzzwords. But in reality, those are the false solutions that further harm Black communities.
So I want to get back to climate change in a moment, but let me while we're here, let me stay here for a moment. So I'm in California. My peoples are from the South, part of that great migration to the West during and immediately after World War II, get jobs in the defense industries at the ports, and to escape white terrorism in the South. So my grandmama and my granddaddy had a total of 11 children. She had four sons by her first marriage, met my grandfather, had seven more children. So the land that my grandmother and grandfather owned is now bequeathed to seven children. Those seven children are now all deceased, and the land goes to their children. So when you say a fractionated interest, I have inherited, what my mom inherited, but I have siblings. I get a letter in the mail out here in South LA saying, "Hey, you want to sell your interest back home?" I was like, "Hell yeah, you know how much it costs to live in Los Angeles? Give me the money, show me the money, where the money reside." So I give up or I sign whatever piece of paper saying I, Thandisizwe Chimurenga, give this up, hoping that I can get my little portion of whatever that land is worth, get it to me in cash, right? But
Right.
it's not that simple. That's what you're saying by the issue of fractionated interests.
That's correct. I would even say, what to add a layer of complexity, as if that wasn't complex enough, is that it also depends on remarriage in that next generation. So there are situations where family members believe, because they're a biological descendant of a person, that they're also the legal heir of that person, and that is not always the case. And so that makes it even more complicated, where you might have someone that believes that they are a legal heir because they're biologically an heir of the deceased, and in reality that inheritance went to a different person, usually a spouse that married into the family. And so I say all that to say that one of the risks of not working with legal counsel that understands how heirs property works is that it can take a while to figure out exactly who owns what and what you're entitled to, because there are folks that do not participate in paying the taxes on the property. And so even if there were a sale of the property, their interest might need to go to back owed taxes. And so it's extremely complicated and requires a good amount of time and a good amount of investment to make sure that the transaction is actually legal. And so what some of these business entities try to do is force the legal process to move more quickly than the family can really unearth the truth of who the legal heirs are. And that's some of the most challenging aspects of the legal work connected to heirs property.
Okay, that's definitely challenging, but I wanted you to talk about the scary part that you had
Well,
before. The
yeah.
scary part
Okay.
being
Okay. So we're going there. Okay,
okay,
let's go there. So so
I say
so
the part that scared me.
So let's say that you own your mother's 1/7. You and your three siblings own 1/3 of 1/7 of the family's land. And I am a solar farm corporation, and I send you a letter right around time that taxes are due or bills are due, and I say, I'll pay you $2,000 for your third of 1/7 interest of 50 acres of land in Louisiana. And you say, wow, this is great. Like, I didn't have to do anything. This is just my inheritance. Let me take my portion. And then that person, I would then take that signature from you, go to the court and say to the court, I don't know where any of these people live. I just want to build my solar farm on this property. I now have to talk to 11 people about making any decisions about this property, because we all collectively own this property. And the action is called a partition action. And it's actually the case that the judge should really have the land partitioned in kind, where there's a map taken out and each each individual gets their deed with their fractionated portion mapped out. But oftentimes the court will say, well, it's a little too complicated to value the piece of the land by the tree versus the pieces of the land by the road. So we'll just sell it in an auction. So now someone else has stepped into your shoes and has forced the sale of your family's entire estate. And the chances that the family's coordinated enough to beat the auction to the sale is very, very low. And the chances that they have any kind of coordinated effort to buy back the property is exceedingly low. And so the partition action is one that can result in an innocent heir that lives far away, not understanding that by selling their interest, they actually are putting the entire property in jeopardy. And that was a tool that was used by developers all throughout the South.
That sounds like a horror movie to me.
It is.
That sounds like, oh, that's a horror story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've definitely seen, you know, I've had folks come to me for me to try to get their land back, especially after the Bruce's Beach incident, which was, you know, the government played a role in the theft of that property. But a lot of times it's a private party and there is no recourse. You know, there's a very short time frame after that sale occurs, and there might be a completely different chain of title since your family got together and knew who was actually owning that property. So that is a very, very terrifying reality that a lot of families find themselves in.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Yeah, that's a horror story. Okay, so let me switch from that horror story over to the horror story of the environment. So, again, you are the author of Nothing New Under the Sun, Southern Black Women in the Fight for the Soul of Climate Change. You are a senior policy advisor, senior policy worker with Oxfam, and you've got this program talking about a new era for Black women in terms of the economic challenges specific to Black women in the U.S. in the Southeast. But in terms of climate change, you talk about the fact that Black women have been some of the first true environmentalists, have been doing this work for 40 years. I think what Earth Day is, what, only 50 years old. So I'm sure we were doing it before Earth Day, but maybe the first documentation is around Earth Day. I wanted to, when we talked this morning, you used the term misogynoir in terms of the work around climate change. Let the Black Power media know what you meant by that.
As just an add-on to before I answer that question, very good question. I just wanted to add that Oxfam also released, in partnership with Prosperity Now, a report today about the state of affairs for working women. And as we know, all of the statistics in this country bear out that Black women, low-wage working women are, you know, so abused that you really can't say that there has been much progress when we look at the numbers. And so when I was talking about misogynoir, I was really trying to raise the awareness that a lot of what the media is spending their time reporting on are the young people in the movement, are the white women in the movement. You mentioned Greenpeace and Sierra Club and these huge, the big green environmental organizations have a connotation of being, you know, amongst our community, amongst how we talk about it, it's like a white people thing, like a hippie thing is the tree hugger thing. That's some white people stuff, right? and that's really a co-option, you know, it's just another Columbusing of the actual reality of who's in community doing the work.
Long hair, wearing Birkenstocks, and what else they be doing? The Birkenstocks, really though. They jacked us up with them Birkenstocks. My mama had a pair of Birkenstocks. I was like, really, really, why?
There are black hippies. I think I'm a black hippie. So there is definitely like a portion of that crew that's crunchy and black. And so that's not to say that that movement that's currently uh, represented as the face of the movement doesn't have black folks and especially black femmes in the thought partnership of how to build some of these actions. But if we're going to tell the truth, then we have to really tell the truth of how our entire economic system, we don't have to look too far back in history. Look at the pandemic shutdown. Black working women kept America moving. Black working women, childcare workers, Black working women, healthcare workers, Black working women held our economy on their backs. And there have been so many times where we've held democracy on our backs. And the reality is, because of our relationship to the land, because of our ancestral knowledge of herbs and plants and studying the moon, and some of the black farmers that I've worked with, they are scientists, magicians, alchemists, all of the things. And the reality is they were saying there's something going on with the water, there's something going on with the soil quality, there's something going on with these things, and they were not being listened to. And the black women that started the environmental justice movement, and a lot of those organizations never received any federal funding, they never received huge grants and donations. And some of these big organizations have so many resources, and yet no infrastructure in the Black communities, the Black, brown, and indigenous communities that are the most likely to bear the brunt of the climate change harms. Those communities, as I mentioned in the article, the Vessel Project had to use a GoFundMe campaign to rebuild after the tornado. So we're talking about grassroots organizations really doing the work, really fighting for our community's health, our community's well-being. And just another slap in our face as Black women is that we lead these charges, we sound the alarms, we're ignored by and large. And then when it really comes to now the earth is on fire. Now there's such a heightened sense of urgency that since the pandemic, there are very few climate deniers now. It's just now how do we commercialize and profiteer off of greenwashing the movement. But the fundamental arguments about our environment directly impacting our physical health, that came out of Black women's wisdom. And I don't think that we're given adequate credit and respect for that work that we really, have been carrying on without any financial resources for decades.
Mm-hmm. Something you said reminded me of this article that I came across the other day. Let's see. Hold on a second. I'm trying to. Hold on. Where you at? There you go. This is from the Guardian newspaper, and it's talking about the Congo. I'm trying to see the date on here. I can't see the date. But it says staggering rise in women with reproductive health issues near the DRC cobalt mines. It's a recent study. So, okay, there it is, 28 March. So this is from last month in the Guardian. And there was something in here. Hold on one second. First paragraph. Women and girls living in cobalt mining communities in the Democratic Republic of the Congo are reporting a staggering rise in serious reproductive health issues, including miscarriages and birth defects. And it goes on to quote the report, the study. But here's the part right here. Anais Tabalaga, a legal and policy researcher at the organization that did the report, and the lead researchers told The Guardian one of the most striking findings that we discovered was the differentiated impact on women. We knew there had been research linking cobalt mining to reproductive health issues, but we did not know the scope of it until we began these interviews. When we think about mining, whether it's diamond mines, conflict diamonds, whether it's the DRC, whether it's South Africa, we always think about the men who do that dangerous work. But check this out. Anneke van Woudenberg, the executive director of RAID, that's the organization, said, I've worked in the DRC for 25 years, and men are often reluctant to discuss female health issues. But men were also saying something is going wrong with our women.
Mm,
Something is going wrong with our women.
mm. You know,
Again, we don't think about Black women when we talk about environmentalism, when we talk about climate change and fossil fuels and pollutants. We talk about what they're doing to the environment and how that comes back and affects our communities. But we don't talk about these industries where they are actually located and what they are doing to the surrounding communities and environments.
exactly. And, you know, this year was the first that I saw as much attention paid to Black Maternal Health Week.
Right.
And my senior thesis in undergrad was about the racial disparity in maternal mortality here in the United States, because I'm originally from Jamaica. And there are so many ways in which I've been acculturated to the United States. And I hear things, you know, I think oftentimes in the United States, when we're talking about women's suffering, women's poverty, women's health issues, there is this somewhere off on the continent, somewhere in the Caribbean or Latin America, there's this kind of imagining of these sufferings occurring somewhere far off. And the reality is, and as I mentioned in the article, one of the most emotionally gut-wrenching moments that I had when I was in Mossville, Louisiana, was when some of the women were talking about the pregnancy loss they suffered because they live in so-called Cancer Alley next to these petrochemical refineries.
Mhm.
And you know, that was one of the things I was grappling with as a college student. How can your race make you predisposed to a poorer health outcome as a mother within the year of giving birth? And so, you know, you can't really say that it's just education and then it's wealth. There's so many things in the environmental pollutions. There's so many ways in which, you know, even from basic chemistry, when you put different chemicals together, there are compounding effects. There's not just one isolated impact from being exposed to poor air quality. You know, it's almost like this alarm has been being sounded by our bodies for so long that I rarely meet Black women that haven't suffered some form of reproductive health issue right here in the United States. And especially because, you know, it was not polite to talk about that in the South. That wasn't a main conversation. But when you look at the built environment and the choices that were intentionally made to disrupt and displace Black folks, drive down the property value. My dad used to tell us that when I was growing up in Orlando, Florida, and downtown was really, you know, really like what we would call hood, right? Like, I know that's not PC anymore, but it was like, it was not, you didn't want to be down there late at night by yourself. I'll put it that way. And that was because my dad was like, they're just trying to drive down the property values.
And run people out.
And then they can run the Black people out. And I just, you know, like I said, coming from another country, you have this America on the pedestal concept, or I did at the time. And then I would have these conversations, and just going to Mossville, it was just another moment where I was like hit with that reality that like this post-colonial Black woman experience is unmatched. It can be anywhere in the global South, anywhere in the US South, anywhere in the world. Black feminine people are under attack by these choices that are made, not individual choices. So it's not about whether or not I listened to Captain Planet and I recycled. It's not about my individual choices. It's about what the wage depression of my entire group of women experience in every industry puts us in a certain economic bracket where we can only afford to live in certain places. And when they're making decisions about bringing these extractive industries, bring these toxic, harmful industries into communities, they count us as, throwaway zones, as
Simple. Yeah.
and we're not humanized, we're dehumanized. And that's part of why when we say that something's wrong, we're not listened to. So many Black women who died within a year of having their baby. Serena Williams spoke about this. You tell your doctor something's wrong, and they say, oh, that's just motherhood. Welcome to motherhood. And then these women end up dead, whereas their white counterparts say that their pinky nail hurts, and every physician in a 6-mile radius is
Come
on.
running.
And
They run.
and it's also like, I take that to say it's like the canary in the mine, because we're sounding the alarm. And now it's like my grandmother would say, who no hear feel. The Black women tell the truth, we're ignored, and then now everyone else has to feel it to believe it. And that's part of why the climate is in the crisis that it is currently in. And I'm not trying to minimize the case in Congo. It's atrocious, ways in which our sisters are abused by these international, multinational companies. And we all, as humans, need to be sounding the alarm that this is unacceptable for Black women to be living in close proximity to these facilities.
Now, again, I got to bring in to the conversation. I need to figure out a way to get paid by HBO, because I be hyping HBO up. I don't even think they call it HBO anymore. They call Max, but I'm gonna call them HBO. True Detective, Night Country. I'm going to bring this up, especially when I'm around you, every chance I get. You have to see. I told you I'm into popular culture. You have to watch True Detective, Night Country on HBO. And the same thing go for y'all, BPM family. If you have not seen this most recent season of True Detective on HBO, you need to watch it. So it takes place in Alaska, and it starts out as a search to find out who killed these missing scientists and researchers. And it come to find out it's tied to a case where an indigenous woman, a midwife, was killed. Yes, I'm telling you the plot because I don't care. It ended in January. It's too late. It's too late for those niceties. Just watch the show. You watch the show so you can see how the writers brought it all together,
Right.
and how it has been quote unquote visualized for you. So
Right.
there are other issues at play here, but the point being is that this midwife, this sister, saw firsthand what was happening to the community based upon pollutants from a mine,
Right.
and the role that the scientists played in assisting the mine, not falsifying the pollution in this instance, not falsifying the pollution from the mines, but asking the mine to create more pollutants to make their work easier.
Right.
And it's like, okay, and they were confronted like, okay, and so how many people were you prepared to kill? And they was like, you don't understand, this could change the world. But
Right.
yeah, of course there's always going to be collateral damage. There's always going to be those expendable persons
Right.
as you seek this quote unquote greater good. But we always end up being the ones who are expendable. We
Absolutely.
always end up being the ones who are collaterally damaged.
Absolutely. I was just in dialogue with a native sister from the Pacific Northwest. She's a fisher woman. And,
Mhm.
she was talking about how, the ancestral wisdom and their tradition is to think about multiple generations ahead.
Mhm. Mhm.
And just the reality that their ancestors had the foresight to put into their treaties language around the rights that they had to manage and access the natural resources, yet and still they still have to fight these decades long court battles just to have any kind of respect of their rights. And you want to talk about missing and murdered women, the Native American women. Just Alaska is like one of the highest rates of violence against women. There's a lot of murder of Native American women, and it feels, I'm glad that show is really highlighting the interplay, because I feel like sometimes it's like that one hand is over here doing one thing and then there's like a whole other thing happening. But it's not just entertainment. That story that you're sharing, and yes, you do tell me to watch it every time we talk. You do, so you better own stock in that station. But I'm really glad that they are highlighting the interplay, because in our rural communities, those are the realities that are Black, Brown, and Indigenous women. That's the level of violence that they're exposed to just for telling the truth, just for being stewards of their historical knowledge and ways. And our midwives in our communities, I know doulas are having a moment. There's like a resurgence in appreciating the value of a midwife or a doula, but though they are advocates, that's what they do. They want to make sure that women are healthy and safe as they make that journey into motherhood. And so it makes a lot of sense that the show would portray it in that way, that the midwife would have the pulse on what's happening in that community. And in regard to the article, it's really stunning to me that men were speaking out, because that's something that I've been saying recently, is that at Black men, I love them and I need them to become womanists. And the ones that I've met, special place in my heart. But we really need our Black men to, stop the podcast bashing, and really prioritize, like,
Advocate for us.
we're in a state of emergency in terms of our health, our vulnerabilities. And I'm telling you, with it being an election year, there's going to be a demand that we cape for a certain political party. And it's going to be expected that Black women turn up and get people to the polls. And regardless of the outcome, the reality is that our communities have been extremely divested from. And now, even with Justice 40, we're put into competition in ways that are quote unquote race neutral, that in reality only further disadvantage our communities when it comes to resources. And even Black women scientists getting published to do the studies. There's a podcast that I enjoy called Therapy for Black Girls. And it was the first time I heard the statistic, and it scared me so badly, because I have a 10-year-old daughter, and they were saying that young Black women are catching up to white men in rates of suicide. Because at one point, because a lot of our folks were so religious, that had a protective role in mental health. But we're seeing our young Black girls, our young Black femmes, catching up to white men who have the highest rates of suicide in our country. And so all of the alarms are being sounded. Black women are literally unsafe in so many ways, and especially because of our special and sacred connection to the land, sacred connection to motherhood, and all of the healing practices from our ancestors. We need to be protected, and it's an all hands situation.
All hands on deck, most definitely. I want to bring into the conversation now an article from, I believe, 2013. Now, This is an article by a man by the name of Robert Jensen. It's been brought to my attention by one of my colleagues that Robert Jensen is transphobic. So I do want to acknowledge that ahead of time. But before I learned about this criticism of him being transphobic, I was put on to him because he is a professor of journalism. And he caught my attention because he wrote an article that said journalism needs less objectivity, not more. And he talked about the ways that objectivity have been misused in journalism and how journalists need to become as educated as possible and provide that context and information to their readers as a way of better serving their readership. I thought, oh, wow, check this out. He also talks about the impacts of white supremacy and patriarchy. And this is an article that he wrote. Hold on. Let's see. I'm trying to see if I can make it larger. Nope. There we go. All right. So it temporarily took us out, but we still here. This is an article that he wrote in Truth Out in 2013. He said the future must be green, red, black, and female. Now, of course, I would have loved if he had said red, black, and green, but I won't quibble. I won't quibble that he didn't put it in the correct order. Okay, fine, whatever. The future of the human species, if there is to be a future, must be radically green, red, black, and female. Let me go down for a second. Again, this is from Truth Out in 2013. Green. The human future, if there is to be a future, will be green, meaning the ecological worldview will be central in all discussions of all human affairs. We will start all conversations about all decisions we make in all areas of life by recognizing that we are one species in complex ecosystems that make up a single ecosphere. We will abide by the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology as we understand them today, realizing the ecosystems on which we depend are far more complex than we can understand. As a result of the ecological worldview, we will practice real humility in our interventions into those ecosystems. Red, the human future will be red if there is to be a future. I mean, we must be explicitly anti capitalist, an economic system that magnifies human greed and encourages short term thinking while pretending there are no physical limits on human consumption is a death cult. To endorse capitalism is to sign on to a suicide pact. We need not pretend there exists a fully elaborated plan for a replacement system that we can take off the shelf and implement immediately. But the absence of a fully explicated alternative doesn't justify an economic system that has dramatically intensified the human assault on the larger living world. Capitalism is not the system through which we will craft a sustainable future. Black. The human future, if there is to be a future, will be black. By that, I mean we have to reject the pathology of white supremacy that has for 5 centuries shaped the world in which we live and continues to shape us. Do not confuse this with shallow multiculturalism. I'm not suggesting that by celebrating diversity, we will magically create peace and harmony. Instead, we must recognize that the existing distribution of wealth is the product of a profoundly pathological system of racial hierarchy conceived of and perpetuated by white Europe and its offshoots, i.e., the United States, Australia, South Africa. Now, this was in 2013. Of course, I will add Israel and New Zealand to that. And finally, female. The human future, if there is to be a future, will be female. By that, I mean we have to reject the pathology of patriarchy that has for several thousand years shaped the world in which we live and continues to shape us. Again, this should not be confused with the tepid, liberal, and third wave versions of feminism that the dominant culture acknowledges. Instead, we must embrace a radical feminism that rejects the hierarchy and violence on which male dominance depends. Now, again, I just want to acknowledge that Robert Jensen is said by some of my comrades who happen to be trans to be transphobic. However, when I met him through his works, I knew nothing about his transphobia. I was just excited to see a bona fide journalist saying, "No, ain't no such thing as objectivity." And a white man saying, "Oh yeah, white supremacy, patriarchy, bad, no good." I was like, "Whoa, check you out." But again, this is from 2013, and he's talking about the need for patriarchy and white supremacy to basically be destroyed in order to save the planet, and explicitly talking about that the future is female. So, based upon, I know this probably the first time you're seeing this, based upon those excerpts, in addition to your knowledge base, Dãnia Davy, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, my first thought is that there's no room in the movement for transphobia, and I appreciate you acknowledging that you know that that's a specific harm to our community. I don't think that we can have conversations about what the future looks like built upon transphobia, and
Mhm.
especially in this moment in time when you know there are active efforts underway to take human rights away from people because they're trans. I think it's really important that we put that within the context of, misogynoir, because whenever you have any group that, for whatever your ideological, religious, ethical bias carry you towards speaking out against them, that is predicated upon the white supremacist patriarchal racial capitalism that we all suffer under. And there's a specific harm experienced by trans people in the United States and around the world. And I also, as soon as I saw it, I was thinking about the Black Women Best framework by Janelle Jones. And there's a really great report on Roosevelt Institute's website called Black Women Best, the framework we need for an equitable economy.
Mhm.
And I think that in terms of white men having access to being published and getting these words out in 2013, I think he played a really a good role in ushering that message forward, because everyone has a role to play in dismantling anti-Black racism and misogynoir. And that is really the most urgent issue of all of the issues. The environment, the economy, those are just the symptoms of a fundamental attack on Black femmes. And I think that if we really go all the way back to the foundation of this country, and when they were drafting that original document, the Constitution,
Mhm.
and they were paying attention to excluding certain groups of people from benefiting from the rights written about in that document, that is really why we have all of the problems. I will go as far as to say that the United States, we're looking at Gaza right now. The report just came out that our arms trading with Israel violates international law.
Of
We're actively supporting genocide as a country, and we have these beautiful students walking out right now in Atlanta. There's students walking out of Morehouse. And I'm just so proud of these young people being able to connect the dots, because, settler colonialism is a very specific form of colonization. And that attack that we're seeing playing out, it's almost like the universe is just giving us the playbook of exactly how we can fix all the world's harms. Because to this article's credit, we do need to center, and I will go so far as to say, in America, we needed to center Black women, because the objective person in US law and US case law is the white man, or in some cases, the white woman. So, what would appeal to getting a white woman out to vote on an issue? What would appeal to a hardworking cishet white man, getting him to vote or speak out on an issue? And so I think our political and economic institutions are always chasing after those as the objective perspective. But the reality is, if we want to measure the health of a nation, you have to look at the most vulnerable people in that community. And in the United States context, that's Black trans women, and Black women across the board. That is the most vulnerable person living in the United States today. And so if we can create laws, institutional policies, an economic environment in which those people have guaranteed income, have competitive wages, have benefits, paid family leave, maternal leave, if those people are able to provide for their families as a nation, that's when we'll be able to say that we're doing well as a nation. If we're not able to say that Black women are drinking clean water, breathing clean air, working jobs that don't abuse and violate them, if they have safety in their communities and safety in their homes, that's the measure of whether the United States will be able to be maintained. Because if you think about what democracy is touted by this country abroad, it's really what Black women do. When we look at these polls and we see these problematic elected officials who go after and against basic fundamental human rights for all the people living in this country, we then ask Black women to go to their churches and organize. We ask them to go to their communities and organize and save the day. We ask the Stacey Abrams, we ask the Black women who are already doing all the things just to take care of themselves, to then carry the burden of saving this nation's presumptive display of democracy. And so if we're not centering Black women, working Black women as the measure for the health of this nation in the future, I really have questions about what this country will look like, the ways in which we're polluting the world, the ways in which we have blatant disregard. You know, there was a decision made in terms of the environmental justice versus the climate justice. So where the white-Black split was that in international law, you really were hard pressed to get a judge to agree that protecting human rights was important, but protecting endangered species, whether that be plant or animals, became the strategy. And so a lot of the money that's gone into the big greens is specifically around animal and plant species. And that's where the disconnect to the Black community comes in. But the reality is that if we want to measure what climate change mitigation looks like for the future of this country, what the economy and democracy look like for this country, that will have to be an explicitly pro-Black woman policy regime. And if we're unable to do that, if we're unable to galvanize the political will to address the most vulnerable of this community, then I really have concerns about what the legacy of our generation will be.
Yeah, but everything you just said, that was nice and good and well, but I'm tired and I ain't even got no kids. Black women are continuously called upon, and even when we're not called upon, we put on the cape anyway and go out the door to save America. I'm kind of thinking we should let it burn. We need a break. Just how about we just how about we just be like, you know what? I think I'm gonna sit this one out. Why don't we just let it burn and put our energy into building something new from the ashes?
Well, I was talking about what America needs to do, not what Black women need to do. Because what America Black women don't need to do anything else. Like, let me just be
Agreed.
like,
Agreed.
Black women don't need to do anything else. Like, everyone who's out there, everyone who wants to, go out and take pictures. I had an experience. I'm thinking about it because I'm going to Cayman next week, and I went to Cayman as a child, and a white woman tourist asked my aunt and uncle if she could take a picture with me. And I was also a tourist from America when this happened. But if you can go to other countries and ask people if you could take pictures with their children, all of that effort you can put into eliminating white supremacy and anti-Black racism out of the white community. That's a lot. That's a heavy lift in and of itself. And so
wait. Why would I do that if I'm white and benefited? Huh?
That's the challenge. That's the challenge of the day. If white folks really would take all of the efforts that they're now using for DEI to put Black folks on their brochures, and they would put those resources into uprooting anti-Black racism from their community, we, like you said, can just build and be creative and do the things that bring nourishment to our wearied souls. I'm tired, like I'm burnt out. So I really think that, the rest ministry, the NAP ministry, the soft life ministry, that's what appeals to me. And everybody else, we've put our labor in, we've put our blood, sweat, and tears in. And so now this is a call to action for the everyone else.
I don't believe in getting up here and running my mouth for hours at a time. We've been on here for an hour and 2 minutes. So there might be some things that I know you just flew into a city. You need to decompress.
Gotta rest my arms.
There you go. I don't necessarily need to decompress, but I don't need to be up here all day running my mouth. So we don't have to be here. But for people who want to keep up with the work that you are doing at Oxfam around Black women, around a new era economically, around the effects of climate change, how to organize against it in the Southeast in particular, or if they just like your smile and want to holler at you, how can people do that?
Please don't holler at me. But you can follow me on Instagram at EnviroMomster. And you can send me an email if you'd like to keep up with the Justice 40 implementation.
Oh, my bad. Before we go, tell folks, what is the Justice 40?
So Justice 40 is a White House initiative that sets aside 40% of certain federal dollars towards so-called disadvantaged communities. Ideally, that would have been, Black folks, Black, brown, and Indigenous folks, but in the climate of the civil rights rollbacks, that disadvantaged communities is extremely inclusive of any community that has been divested of in terms of infrastructure to mitigate climate change. And so what I'm really passionate about in my Oxfam role is making sure that our communities are aware of those resources, they're aware of those grant opportunities. And so I have an email newsletter that I send out on Monday called The Good News that reminds folks about those deadlines coming up and connects them to those resources that are available, as well as if there are specific requests for technical assistance, putting folks in contact with the entities that exist to help write those grant applications. And to be added to that listserv, you can email me at my first name dot my last name at oxfam.org. So that's Dãnia.Davy at oxfam.org.
Thank you so much, Dãnia, for putting up with me and my antics. I'm still going to ask you if you've seen True Detective Night Country on it. I'm going to continue to ask you if you have seen it. I think I even offered to get a description and send you.
People don't need to know. People don't need to know all that. Okay.
I mean, I'm trying to make it easy. I'm trying to work with you. Why aren't you trying to work with me? That's what I'm not getting.
I will definitely. I don't know if you've heard. I just recently discovered that this week when my parents were on vacation, being a single mom is hard. Like, this thing is not for the. I'm so tired, but no, you have been so generous. And this is not the first show that you've tried to put me onto, but I'm always grateful to you trying to keep me hip and understanding what's in these cool folks conversations. But it's a treasure and a pleasure and a treat to chat with you. So I'm grateful for the time that we've shared.
Well, thank you so much for giving me some of your time to share with the Black Power Media audience. I'm sure they really appreciate it. So I'm going to let you go now. I'm still going to ask you about True Detective, but I'm going to let you go now, let you decompress and get your rest, and I will speak with you later.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dãnia. Appreciate you. All right, BPMers. That's going to be it for me today. I told you in the beginning to like this video. I think it was pretty good. So can you like it now since you didn't do it when I first asked you to do it? Please like the video. Please share the video. Please subscribe to Black Power Media here on YouTube. Please subscribe and at the Patreon link. So tell somebody about this. Tell somebody about all the programming here on Black Power Media. My name is Thandisizwe Chimurenga. This is Rootwork. I hope y'all take care of yourselves. Have a good weekend. I'm out. Peace.